Hello?
Yo,
Alright. So you just wanna do this without judging, we can get the judge after.
if you just consensus about that. Yeah, I'll probably just be able to investigate it. Yeah, we can do Islam. So you said the dichotomous stance is just going to be like the negation for Islam being true, right?
Repeat that again?
You said that your dichotomous stance towards mine was just going to be the negation about Islam being true, right?
Yep, that's correct. Alright, so pretty much that's the case. But before we start, can we just I'll establish some of the rules. Just like loud mic and shit, and like no disingenuous tactics. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, sure, man. Anyways, yeah, go ahead, keep provide argumentation. And it's not going to be true.
Alright. So Islam's disposition of God would be one that is an omnibenevolent, omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent creator of the universe. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So my problem with that is these divine attributes of God cannot coexist, right? When there is so much evil and suffering in the world, pretty much. So if God is omnipotent, and that means he would be able to stop all evil. If he's omniscient, he would know how to do it. And if he's omnibenevolent, then he would want to do it. So if that's the case, then why does such evil and suffering exist in the world? That's my question.
Oh yeah, sure. So basically, when we talk about this, like the moral nature of God, right? We know this is basically just his model knowledge, right? And we know that from the Quranic verses, the Quran is basically the established word of God within Islamic theology, and we derive most of our argumentations or knowledge from the Quran. Just said, right? So basically, this world within the Quran is viewed as a test. So when he says that, like, when you ask if, like, why does he just stop it, right? It's not that he doesn't want to, right? Want and, like, actualizing something, like, yeah, he could be omnipotent at the same time, right? But what I'm saying is that it's a test of faith. It's not just going to be, like, to the point where he can, yeah, like, hold on.
I see, but the thing is, right? If he's omniscient, then why would he need to test us? Because then he would already know the answer to the test.
Not necessarily the case. Like, I'm not saying necessarily the case.
So omniscience entails all that he can foresee infinitely into the future, all possibilities.
Yeah, I'll just submit that he can see all possibilities, like all different like modal frameworks. He sees all these like set of like modal frameworks or modal scopes he sees within this CU. So like all these different frameworks, he knows the possibilities for anything or what could happen when it's brought up a modal nomological scope. Because when we apply the universe, we would have to apply our own nomological scale because we apply these things to the universe. Right? The universe is understood within a nomological framework because of necessary laws like cause and effect. So when we apply these like established things, we would have to go by things which are like nomological. So it's like, say for an example, right? Let me say, yeah.
Yeah, can you just get to your point? Like, I don't want any of that jargon, because like, can you just get to like the point of like, if he can foresee into the future, then like, why is it the case? Why he needs to test us? And secondly, that doesn't make it morally permissible, because if he's all loving, right, then he would infinitely want to stop all evil and suffering. So why couldn't he create a world, right? So are you saying that he purposely created a world with infinitely more suffering and evil?
Yeah, so the problem with this argumentation, like, why? Wait, hold up. This is presupposing that he wants. Like, let me just like counteract this.
Yeah, your mic cut out.
Yeah. I'm getting to the point. Like about like the good and bad thing. I'll answer this. Like, why would he test if he can do this? Because these bad things are meant to test us. That's the whole fucking point. Why would he stop a test if he, like, is already going to put us through this said fucking test? He knows that these, like, possibilities are, you know, going to be permissible under nomological laws. The reason why I, like, established the modal scope, because it would have to go under this because we're talking about our specific universe and the condition sets within it, right? Within the specific framework of nomology, right? So after this, we're going to have to apply, like, so the good and bad things, I will get to that. Like, so I'm just saying though, anything that's like contrary to like nomological laws won't be like outside of His Majesty, a different multiple, because like I'm just getting to that point. It just had to be all the multiple possibilities known for that, just like for clarification again. But
Yeah, my point is right.
Hold on. I know your point. I'm trying to get to that. So like the reason why he wouldn't stop it is like I already gave the reasoning to that and the epistemological basis for that. The criteria as to the reason why he wouldn't want to stop that would just be his test within this world. The good and bad is the test for our faith. We were put down because our eternal reward within Jannah depends on how we follow the objective moral laws that are established by Allah, right? So if this is the case that he knows like these answers, right, these multiple possibilities, just because he knows what could happen doesn't necessarily mean it is going to happen unless willed, right? And that would just suggest that there's cause and effect, like going off like the necessary laws within the nomological modal scope. So cause and effect would be there. There's causal relationships for that, and right. So again, the reasoning is already there. It's a test. The reason why he doesn't remove it is because he's trying to test our faith, right?
Okay. So is it possible, right, for him to test our faith without all that suffering and evil? Why does he have to make it so that there's this extent of suffering and evil? Why could he not make it where there's a world where it still tests us, but there's infinitely less evil and suffering, and that this is not and then this world, right, is the exact amount of suffering and evil we need. That's pretty much what you're presupposing, because there's no possible way for that he could make it so that there's less evil and suffering.
Yeah, so what you do is
more permissible, right? Even if you're saying that, can I finish, please? Can I finish? Okay. Even if you're saying that he's gonna reward us, right, in heaven, that doesn't make the action of him creating the world or like fucking earthquakes kill like 50 toddlers. That doesn't make that morally permissible, okay?
Wait. Why? Oh, you do realize that when we talk about morally permissible, we would have to go by what's within Islam, right? Like, you do realize when you're talking about, like, morally permissible, like, what do you mean by morally permissible? Are you, like, referring to external laws or moral things or Islamic ones? Because since we're talking about Islam, we would have to talk about, so underguiding our lines for Islam, we would have to go by that. If we go by a distinct conceptual distinction set, right, that would just basically be applying a different thing, which cannot grant any pragmatism to the claim or argumentation you're making. So when you say morally permissible, right? Do you mean
like we didn't even say morally permissible? We can say there's suffering that he indicted onto the universe and the earth in particular. Okay, so evil doesn't even matter. Suffering. A mom watching her kid get raped, pretty much. That's moral.
Okay, so I get the point. The evil he's doing, right? But why isn't how is this morally permissible though? You made the claim that it's morally not permissible for these earthquakes to keep killing these people in order to reach a conditional of that. If he could, like say for example, in this case, Allah, right, make these things more evil, right? Not more evil, sorry. Started there. Less evil, right? It's because Allah knows basically how much we can handle and won't make us handle much more than that. That's literally stated within the Quran, and we view that as that said word, right? That's the reason why, like, he doesn't need to. He doesn't need to because it's already been established what we can handle. If these are the set things that we can handle, then he doesn't have any reason to do that. That would just be a purposeless action. So,
okay, listen. So he's making it so that he makes the evil and suffering just enough so that we can take it, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So if you would like to make it, if you
here, right? If you're gonna grant that, and if he's omnibenevolent, is there not a case, right, that obviously because he's omnibenevolent, he would want to, right, infinitely more than pretend me, even though I'm not omnibenevolent, he would want to make it so that it's the case where there's less suffering and evil, but he still tests us. But you're saying right now that this is the maximum extent that we can take. But why would he do that if he's omnibenevolent? Why couldn't he make it so that there's infinitely less suffering and evil? Obviously, because he's omnipotent, that he could actualize that case.
Hold. You do realize that, what do you define as omnibenevolent? Like, there could be multiple definitions, which
all loving.
All loving. Okay, so you realize that when we go upon like the certain standard of loving, that would have to like test or go in correlation to how much we go within faith, right? Yes, Allah still thinks about you, etc., right? But the more you go away from Him, and the more that you fail His test, the more eventually He's going to have to do this situation is send you to Jahannam, right?
Okay.
So when we talk about like when we talk about omnibenevolence, again within Islamic theology, yes, Allah is loving. He can be all loving at a certain point. But when it comes to the end, the day of judgment, let's say for an example, right? When somebody has a literal, like just say for example, like thousands of sins, right? They haven't repented or asked for repentance. They've done no good deeds at all. No good deeds which uphold the test of Allah. Right? So within that case, at that point, he's going to have to make a decision which sends you to eternal punishment.
Okay.
That would mean he punishes
right?
you once.
So let me redefine my term here, because I don't think you're getting my point. Because I'm saying all loving and morally perfect, okay? So that means he's morally perfect. What I'm saying here is that is the action. Listen, can I finish? That is the action. We're not going to talk you over each other. I just let you finish right there, right? I let you finish. It's all a 3-minute ramble, but like you have to let me finish.
I don't think you get my point at all. What I'm saying is that when we talk about like all on the omnibenevolent, right? I'm saying that he would still have his trait, right? Like, because you're trying to argue, like, if he's omnibenevolent, he would have to, like, or it would just be conditional, or a conditioned set of things that he would have to, like, make it less just buy that trait. No, not exactly, because he's pushing us through that test, right? Again, I'm going to repeat the argument. He can counter it like that real quick, too, because I'm going to counter that. So when he is omnibenevolent, right? As I said, it's in a certain point in time. But with the example I brought up, he's going to bring you down to Jahannam, which means he's going to have to send you to eternal punishment. Eternal punishment, and like this punishment's like where you go away from Allah, right? That means Allah can still love you, but like, say for an example, you're just away from Him. Like, I think should be happier about this. Like, I think we could just grant that it wouldn't necessarily be upon like the burden of Allah.
Can I finish? I've let you ramble for the past 5 minutes. Can I finish? I get your point, okay? Listen. So, my definition of omnibenevolence, just to be clear here, is morally perfect and all-loving, okay? So he's either all-loving or he isn't, okay? It isn't this thing where he's like, he's all-loving if you believe in him, he's all-loving if he isn't, if you don't believe in him. My point here is very simple, okay? Just because, listen, Seiba, just because, right, I punch you in the face and then I give you $2 billion to your entire family, that doesn't make the action of me punching your face and like molesting your entire family, that doesn't make it morally permissible, does it not? No. Just because I gave you like eternal life or like $2 billion to compensate for it, that doesn't make the action of me punching you in the face morally permissible. He's either all loving you or he doesn't. If he's sending you to hell, right, that's...
Okay, wait. Are you trying to argue that's just gonna be like a sign that's not all loving?
Yeah, no. The three divine attributes that I just mentioned, that being omniscience, omnibenevolence, omnipotence, can't coexist, right? If you go out this world's evil and suffering, which obviously pertains.
Okay, so again, I'm just gonna repeat the question because I don't think you like ultimately answered the question at all. You just kind of danced around it. You just like repeated like the start of the argumentation. Like, I'm asking you, are you arguing at that last point? Let's just backtrack to that point real quick, right? Are you arguing that since he sent you to hell, as an example, this would be a sign that it's like not all loving?
No, it's not like really like indicative of him not being omnibenevolent. But the main point is the first point that I brought up, meaning that does make the action morally permissible, does it not? That if the current action doesn't make up for the end results. So let's think about this from another person's perspective, okay? Let's say, right, you're Islamic and like you're Muslim, right, and you're devoted, and then you see your entire family, right, get raped, right, and like you're chained up against the wall, right? Why would God allow such evil and suffering that the Muslim might experience just and for him to to continue believing in Islam, right? Just because he will grant eternal life after he dies, right? Post-mortem. That doesn't make the action of him seeing God allowing him to watch his family all get raped morally permissible. That's what I'm saying, okay? And you're not tracking that. And like, just because it's a test doesn't make the current action morally permissible. You're not tracking it.
So again, hold on. I already fucking answered this. Hold on. Let me just repeat that real quick. I actually just dismissed this frame. So, what you're just basically trying to apply is that it's the other person who's sinning, right? And you don't believe within Islam because of this, right? And why would he allow this, right? So I already answered this, right? And we know because the other action would just depend upon the other person. That would be their test of faith. You do know that when the test of faith are being applied, right? Within Islam, right? It's being applied universally to the whole entire collective of humanity, right? So when you ask if that's morally permissible or not, it doesn't have to be morally permissible, but that entire point would just be upon this person, the effect, right? It's a sin coming from another person. It's not necessarily which in this point, I already said it's gonna be a test for humanity. Humanity is upholding this, right? But this specific person within humanity is not. So if this guy is no. So again, within this test of humanity, this person is not upholding it. And I'll just finish real quick. Basically, oh my gosh, she's such a retard. Basically, again, right? So how is it non-morally permissible, right? He does not. I already said the morally permissible part does not follow for the other guy committing the sin. It wouldn't be morally permissible, but the guy is failing the test, right?
Okay, Seiba, are you finished? Okay. Tell me when you're finished.
Hold. I ain't done yet. What you're doing is you're just misconfusing the point about morally or just moral problems that contradict Islamic law or go against them, which would just be haram, would be applied to the point of the sin, right? It's basically being a sin committed by another person, right? The sin is not morally permissible, but within this framework, the guy raping the family is committing the sin. It isn't morally permissible for this guy, right? But for evil to exist, it's a test of our faith. And like you said, you exactly just proved my point. Say, for example, you said the guy, what if he doesn't follow within Islam because of this, right? It's the effect being applied to him, right? Via that sin. It's affecting his test of faith. But Allah knows he can handle this within this, right? If he's omniscient, he knows the possibility. That doesn't change the fact that, he doesn't love him at all. It doesn't provide any type of contradiction or contradiction the attributes of his morally perfect nature. When we talk about unbelievable evidence, right? If the person doesn't stop, Allah won't actually stop loving a person. It's only basically the guy losing faith within him. And speaking about that, if he knows this is the case, why wouldn't he stop evil? Again, I already answered this. It's a test of faith. It's being applied to the test.
Can I respond now, please? I'll give you a point, okay? Listen, you're going back to the test point. I'm going to respond to the point that you just brought up, okay? What I'm saying, if you're going to bring up the free will defense, okay? If you're going to say that, it's the guys that free will that allowed him to rape, okay? Listen. My point is, why would God create a universe, right, and world where that thing even exists in the first place? He created the universe where the rape exists and that it's going to be mutually applied so that the Muslim, right, the one who believes in Almighty Allah, will still experience that pain, okay? And another point, right, let me bring up an analogy, just make it clear to you, is if I make a robot, right, that I know will inflict a mass amount of genocide and suffering, right, and rape, right, and the inside that robot, right, was the fucking wires, right, and they have to experience all that rape and suffering. So does that make the action of me making that robot morally permissible or not? Okay, if I make a robot and that robot inflicts an enormous amount of suffering and pain onto the universe, that doesn't make the action of me making it morally permissible. It makes it morally incorrect that I'm creating the earth where it exists, rape, torture, genocide, all the shit that we all know causes massive amounts of suffering and evil.
Yeah, I don't think you got my point at all. Because, hold up. When I said test of faith, right, I'm going to go back to that point because it does correlate to this real quick. So when I say test of faith, that's being applied to collective insanity. That's just why I mentioned the collective insanity. Morality is being applied to humanity. It doesn't necessarily apply to where Allah stands. Like, when we say these morally permissible laws, we are to follow it as a test of our faith to achieve reward, etc., right? But when we talk about Allah, right, these moral laws are basically being established and derived from him. If we apply something that's being established and derived from a being, that's just going to be a contradiction towards their nature as God, because God generally, with like in Islamic theology, does not have a clause. He's basically eternal. Like, so like he's infinite by the eternal like inference using here. So again, if we apply moral laws to him, we'd be applying some contingent to that. So again, this is just going to be a P and not P right there. Two dichotomous things which we cannot apply to each other because each one excludes the other option. And again, like the entire point revolves around trying to apply something which is meant to be applied towards humans. And the reason why is the test of faith and their belief within Islam, Allah, and their submission to him. Why would he want to create this universe? Again, the test of faith, where he follows the subjects. Islam, the submission to God. Submission to God is the test. So, when he expects you to follow something, he wants you to follow. So, again, you're not actually understanding what I'm implying because, like, when we say, is it morally permissible that Allah does this, etc., we cannot apply moral laws that are contingent from Allah for us to follow to his own being. That would contradict his entire mental ontology within Islamic theology. And that would just basically cause a total collapse for the said proposition or the framework in itself, because that would just, again, as I already stated. So,
let me give an analogy, okay? So, let's say, right, your entire family is in a fire, right? No, you see another family, right? And they're burning into a fire, right? And the house is entirely on fire. And then you have the power, right? You have the power to like douse that and save that entire family, right? That's burning in the house. And you're just watching them. And you just literally just watch them die. Does that make action of you not doing jack shit when you can, morally permissible or not? That's what I'm saying here. God can intervene at any time when he's seeing that family get raped, but he doesn't do shit. And the thing that's even worse, right, is you can only take the oil, it's a test to a certain extent. You cannot make all these actions of him watching like animal suffering, like animal cannibalism, all this dumb shit that he created himself, that he imbued the world's metaphysics with, that he created the universe where exists such prevalence of evil and suffering. You cannot just dismiss this all because it's a test, okay? Because that does make the action of him creating the universe in the first place morally permissible, and that contradicts his morally perfect and all-loving stature that you are appealing to here, as that Islam is appealing to here, to be more specific.
I don't think it's contradiction at all, you idiot. Okay, so again, as I already said, Allah tests us to our limit, right? So let's say if this person's limit, and Allah knows he can handle, he will only make somebody or will something that can happen as a possibility because he's aware of these possibilities. In this framework, then it would have to be to their own limit in which they can handle, because Allah can know or knows what they can handle, right? If he does something which they cannot handle, that would be a contradiction to his moral nature, right? So in that case, that's the reason why I brought that fucking up. Within that framework, if we're applying Allah to this scenario, again, we would have to just fucking apply that the point of that entire thing is going to be to where they can handle it. So again, it's just, oh my gosh. So within the framework, like I already said, it's the fucking, oh man. So, is it morally permissible? Yes, it is going to be morally permissible. It will be morally permissible because it does not contradict the nature which you're suggesting. That's just going to be an invalid inference for you.
Okay, so listen, if you're gonna say that, oh yeah, God's creating it so that it's the extent that what humans can handle, that doesn't justify the actions, okay? So if I rape someone, right, but I don't rape them hard enough, right, so that they get pissed at me, that still doesn't make the rape morally permissible now, does it? I'm not saying just because he made it so that it's just enough that humans can handle. That doesn't make the action of him imbuing the world with such evil and suffering morally permissible. When he could just make it like, for example, heaven and Jannah in Islam, where free will exists and there's absolutely no evil. So why doesn't he just do that? And if he just wants it to be a test, right, then he's literally omniscient, we just discussed. So why would he want to test us when he wants us to live like a life like in heaven?
Okay, so you're a retard. One, I already suggested that this would be obtaining to the possibilities of what can happen when he wills something. It doesn't guarantee the entire scenario is going to be the case that, like, it fixes, etc., 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 right? Like, let's just say he can, though. Let's just say he can, right? Let's just grant it for the sake of ultimate argument, right?
No, you have to grant it if you're saying that he's omnipotent.
No, I'm saying let's just grant it for the sake of the argument. Are you stupid? This would just be the sake of the argumentation.
What? So what did you just say? Like, you just said you grant for the sake of the conversation. What? Did you just mic just cut out? Like, you didn't even respond.
Okay, I'm back. Can you repeat that one? I had to deal with something.
Okay, so I'm saying I misrepeated to the extent of argument because you just said, oh yeah, God created the world of evil and suffering to the point where humans can withstand and withstand. But that doesn't make the action of him creating the world of such evil and suffering morally permissible. That's what I'm saying. And if you're saying that he's omnibenevolent, he's morally perfect, etc., then that those attributes of divine attributes of God can't mutually coexist. When you're saying that if there exists a place, right, like heaven, where he would want us to live, obviously because he created it, where everything's literally like perfect, there's no evil and suffering, and it's just like joy.
Then that would just be instantly granted in Jannah. And when we talk about Allah judging things, like we know Allah is like the ultimate judge, right? Then that would just contradict him being the ultimate judge of evil and good. The reason why that exists is because the test I already brought up. The test of faith is meant to go into a conjunctive state of affairs with these moral laws which we are supposed to uphold, right? Although, like, the morally permissible part, I already said we cannot apply moral things or our own morality to Allah because, again, Allah is necessary and works on a different framework than us, especially when we consider the morality which we obtain from Islam or any other sect, right? Like, why would it be like, say, for example, morally permissible that God grants a pig to be eaten despite it already being haram, right? Why would that, like, so what you're saying is that morally permissible things can be applied to God. My entire point stating here is for him to create the universe because of this, right? And then I'm saying that we cannot also apply morally permissible things to God because of the fact that it's going to be contingent upon him. If there's going to be a contradiction if we apply it to his more perfect nature or something like that. Our own moral laws, which we follow, there would be a contradiction within that. You're not tracking that, Jayden. I already said a P and P within not P and P. P and not P within the morally permissible things or the set of moral things derived from him. We get our morals from Allah. If it's going to be contingent upon God within our scenario, that basically, like, the entire point is that he's a logical necessity for this too. Like, if these things are going to be contingent upon Allah, he's going to be a logical necessity for that. Take that away, that's a contradiction, becomes a mortal collapse, which was my entire point. We cannot access contingent things to a necessary being. Sir, we can make judgments upon him. that doesn't necessarily determine if it's going to be actually morally permissible or not. That will just be within our own subjective framework and belief about him, which goes upon the very foundation of our own fucking beliefs, the test of faith. Test of
So
faith.
you're saying that morality is contingent on him, so it does not apply to him. So let's say, for example, right, if God brings up a child and rapes her, right, does that make the action morally permissible or not? Let me just reaffirm that with you.
Rita, hold on. Oh my. You repeat that?
Okay, so you're saying that since morality, right, in Islam is contingent on Allah, that means that is what you're saying, morality, right, and moral actions does not apply to him. So even if he were to drag a girl up from earth to heaven and rape her, will that not make the action morally permissible or not?
That's a
So I'm going to reaffirm with you, so I'm tracking your argument here. The clarifying question.
Yeah, I know. So that's not necessarily the full extent of my argumentation. I'm saying that when we try and judge on what Allah does, and since these are contingent things, it's just going to follow as the condition said that these contingent things also apply to our own morals and our test of faith, right? And our belief upon Allah. Our belief upon Allah is how we uphold it and judge, not even judge, just like go to Him or like see Him as, like, say for example, our belief in God, like Islam, which just equals submission to God, would be a part of our test of faith, right? And again, since it's just going to be that this, like, say for example, us judging him, making upon a decisive things between these moral, like, judging what moral things are, coming from our consensus of what morality is, since we'd be working off what we have about morality, which exists within a contingent world, right? And within the framework, since God is just going to be the logical necessity for these morals, right, within that said worldview, it's just going to be the case that our judgments are what's morally permissible upon God. It's also going to be subjective frameworks, not necessarily actually being applied to Allah, that this is morally applicable. There is the conceptual distinction. We are making judgments upon Allah using contingent things. These contingent things do not follow upon Allah, therefore He cannot have any form, actually just the substance does not have any form of pragmatic applicability to the being. So, because it lacks this, the claim itself, or just that it's not morally permissible from our judgment, is not going to be true because there's a contradiction within that worldview. That's what I'm saying entirely.
Okay, so what you're saying is that even though he's saying that he's all-loving, right, and he's morally perfect, because morality is contingent on him, then we as human beings cannot make moral judgments on him, whether or not, even if he brings up a kid to heaven and rapes her, that we can still not make judgments on him to say that the action that he just did, in hypothetical, is not morally permissible or not. We cannot even make a moral judgment on him, despite having moral objectivism. Is that the case?
No, I'm not saying that we can't make judgments. I'm literally saying that we can make judgments, and it's just a subjective framework that we have. Therefore, it doesn't actually have any form of, like, objectiveness. Unless, say, for an example, right? Like, again, like, I already used the contingent part, right? I'm saying because it's a contradiction that we cannot actually objectively apply it to him. It's just subjective in what we think about him. Again, that just correlates to the test of belief. Our test of belief within Islam is just going to be made, or rather, our submission to God. So when we talk about submission to God, Islam, right, and we have these things we're applying it to our own dogmatic attitudes about something. So when we have these dogmatic attitudes too, right, it's just going to be subjective again, because if we make judgments against Allah, we are not fully believing within Him, and within the framework about Islamic theology and these moral laws are upheld in like obedience with Allah as the one true God, and we make a separate distinction or just a separate conclusion that He's like not morally permissible, it's not going to have any form of actual substance. And again, I also said that because it's contingent, we don't apply moral things to God, because that brings up a contradiction to his necessary nature as the logical necessity for morality. If we apply some contingent, it's just going to be a P, not P, for him being the logical necessity. So
Okay.
let's just
So let me repeat. Let me ask you another question here, right? Is something good because Allah commands it, or does Allah commanding it make it good? Okay. So what I'm asking here, right, is if something is good because Allah commands it, then morality becomes arbitrary. Whatever God says, even if it's torture, rape, or slavery, if it's good according to Allah, no matter how cruel it seems, it would still be morally permissible to Him. Is that the case?
Executed would be considered good upon his judgment if it is said that via him. Like, say, for example, if Allah gives this command, we must follow it as a test to our belief, right? If this is the case by Islam, submission to God, and we then neglect this, if it truly is his command, then that basically brings up another contradiction. That isn't submission to God. We are floating our test. So, again, if it is said to be the case that this is, right, we follow it, right? And, again, say, for example, what are you leading to here? Sure, yeah, I can grant that it's just permissible per Allah's command. Allah makes it permissible. Yeah, I'll grant that. You heard what I said, right?
Yo, Seiba, what's good, bro?
He's in Paragon.
Yo, did you debate Jayden?
Yeah, I'm debating him right now. Hold up, can people inside this
Oh yeah,
VC give
I'm
us
sorry. Yeah, I'm back. Now. Okay. So one more thing. Okay. Then let's say, right, if Allah commanded, right, genocide, for example, then if he commands genocide in the Quran, right, for example, the Bible, but even though we're not discussing that, for example, so hypothetically speaking, yeah, if he commands genocide, then that would still be morally permissible. Even so, we have to ignore our moral intuition here because Allah commands it. That would make the action morally permissible. Is this the case? Yes or no?
All right, Daud.
Why are all judgments made up on that? And by it being objective within the more realistic sense, then yes, it would be morally permissible per his command. And if we don't uphold it, then we aren't actually upholding a test of belief.
Okay, so you're pretty much implying a literal moral nihilism, where to the point where no matter if God states it, then we wouldn't even know the objective standard here, and we would be blindly following his beliefs, even though shit, my mic is cut out, bro. Hold on, give me a sec. So you're pretty much presupposing here, right? Hello? 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 Hello?
Yo, can y'all hear me? Hello? Alright, so the question you asked, it being morally permissible for us, yeah, it would just be like a thing we would uphold for our submission to God, yes. It would just be like judged by Allah as this absolute like command that we follow. So it would be basically applied to us. And again, if you're just trying to link this to like the judgment part, or just like the thing I said about judgments made upon like Allah or something like that, then that doesn't necessarily discredit that we cannot apply moral laws or just morality or things being morally permissible upon Allah, right? That doesn't negate that. It's just him giving permission for something to be morally permissible. There's like conceptual distinction. We're applying something for it to be morally permissible to the creator, but the creator is applying it to be morally permissible to us. So if you could apply that like propositional link, that's just gonna be like a non sequitur. Like,
Yeah, so the thing is, okay, let me just re-clarify this to my point, is if you're going to say that whatever God says, right, makes it morally permissible, then this would literally just entail literal moral nihilism and make entirely morality arbitrary shit. Because if God says anything that we conceptualize as not morally permissible, like, for example, rape, murder, etc., all of which is stated to be not morally permissible, then if God commands it, then that would automatically make the action morally permissible. Is this the case? Then, if it is the case, then this is anything being good.
Okay, so I don't think you're quite understanding. I said I agreed or granted that if it was the case for something to be granted like this, we would have to follow, right? But that isn't guaranteed that something is like that's haram is going to be made like that, right? Since we're basically like just deriving our sin thesis as contextual structure from the moral laws of Islam as well, and how we followed it in Allah, like test of belief and etc. Like I said, yes, he could give that, right? But he only has that ability. It doesn't necessarily entail that he would, because those are two distinct propositions. Like, it's like, say, for example, if he did say this, I wouldn't necessarily, like, agree he would say this, but if he were to, right, it would be that we have to follow it as a submission to God. But clearly, Islam's moral laws established from Allah as, like, you know, the Quran being the word of God, and we follow the moral laws taught by the Quran, and how we're also supposed to be submissive to the Prophet Muhammad, may peace be upon him. We follow these moral laws established by them, right? So he wouldn't go against his laws. I'm just granting that he does have the ability to do this, right? But back to answering the question, because like I already clarified what I meant with that, like contextual framework. So answering the question, if it would be the case that if he said that this was the case, then that would just infer Allah's words change. Allah's words cannot change. So what is there is like the Quran is not changeable. Like, so Allah's words, like, if they were to be granted, I can say that since Allah's words don't necessarily change, the eternal, so they wouldn't be open to change, since Allah's speech is eternal. If we imply that it would change, there's just going to be a contradiction within that. Each separate speech framework can be distinct from one another, but that doesn't change the fact that it would contradict that and bring about another moral collapse. So no, because I'm not trying to ground a contradiction within Islam, since I'm upholding the truth value. I'll just say no.
Okay, so you're saying no if he says that, for example, murder is good, then that doesn't make him morally permissible. Or he's saying yes.
So you asked me if like he says yes to these things, it's gonna make it more permissible or not.
Yeah,
right?
hold on. Let me just repeat my point, because I think that we both didn't really get it. So I'm saying that if you pretty much just admitted to moral nihilism, where to the point where it would just be like moral absurdity, because
no, I did not.
Morality has zero internal compass. Let's just say, for example, here that God in the Quran. Wait, does the Quran state that murder is wrong? Yes or no? so I can continue my point. Like, does it have standards? Like, murder is wrong, etc.
We allow like
If it has standards, right, then it destroys the whole point of them putting it in the first place. Because then if God would just change his mind, right, and say, oh yeah, genocide is good because this fucker right here, the fucking Christian nation, right, pissed me off, so we're just going to genocide him. That would make him saying, oh yeah, let's go genocide this entire nation, right, morally permissible or not. Because if you're arguing that whatever God says makes the action morally permissible, then that's what it entails.
Okay, so again,
And
I don't think you.
morality of any substance. It's pretty much subjected to his personal states.
Yeah, so I don't actually think you fucking got my point. No, I did not agree to moral nihilism. I said that he could grant this ability, but he would not. Again, so he wouldn't pertain to moral nihilism when upholding these laws. It was like, I said he could have the ability to do this. So what you're doing right here is like strawmanning. I said he wouldn't do either way, so he wouldn't pertain or have like any conviction that would allow for moral nihilism. I just granted that he has the ability to do this. Doesn't necessarily mean it will. That's just why I brought the two distinct propositions and the token distinction between these propositions, which is can and actualize, which is potentiality and actualizing, but the more likelihood of it like being the case for the other proposition that like say for example the potentiality of this being the case is lesser due to Islamic laws. And I heard about the point that Islamic laws or the words that are like within the Quran cannot be changed, right? It's just added more speech which would induce a contradiction. So therefore, since we can have a contradiction, because then that proposition can actually be actualized because it leads to a murder collapse, as I already said, it removes that condition and makes the other proposition a totality, right? So via that contradiction that we have about these moral laws, basically him agreeing to that would just be contradicting the Quran itself. That's just why I granted he has the ability, but he will not. So you strong there by misinterpreting the argumentation and saying I agree to this when I only granted that it has potentiality, it will not be actualized. So I don't think you like quite understood my point there.
Okay, so let's just say so even if we were to grant that, so what I'm saying was putting up a hypothetical here. So if, for example, that God says this specific action would not be morally, for example, genocide, etc., any action that would convey to us moral absurdity. If God says that it's morally good now and he changes his mind, I'm not saying that if he would actually, I'm putting a hypothetical here. It's a hypothetical. We have seen no instances of this happening, but it's quite literally called a hypothetical for a reason. If it's the case that he says it, then it's indicative of moral nihilism and moral absurdity, and it's just ends circular because he just change his mind at any point in time. Say, oh yeah, genocide is good here. Actually, fuck it. No, I'm changing my mind. Because if we're going to derive morality from him, and to the extent that what you're saying.
And so that's the reason why I granted that it won't be the case that is within that like hypothetical as well, because I already granted that would exist a fucking contradiction within that reasoning, and therefore it would make a logical impossibility. That's the reason why I said that there is a contradiction within that thought process, which you're suggesting right now, right? So I did not agree to it, like you said again, right? In the hypothetical, that's just why I granted it would be a contradiction for him to do this. But within this
what I'm saying, okay? So because you'll bring up moral absurdities and that morality would not inherently apply to him, so they bring it back to the problem of evil to say that why would God entail such a world with suffering and evil? Once again, because then you just agreed that whatever God says right now, he can't just change his mind because that would never happen.
Again, like I don't think you're understanding the point. I just granted that he could. It won't be actually actualized. So he can do this, but it won't mean he will. That's the whole entire thing. That's the entire point. There's a conceptual distinction between that. I don't think you're getting that. And again, like, hold up. Moral absurdity, you do realize that within, like, we can't apply moral laws, etc., right? That doesn't induce moral absurdity. And moral absurdity is where there's no right or wrong within moral laws actually existing. Like, when we go into that meta-ethical framework, we already, like, established that there are just laws, but derived from a law, and that we cannot apply the same laws to a law because they are a contingent thing. I don't think you're quite tracking that.
Okay.
That does not actually. No. Let me actually educate you. That does not induce moral absurdity as a philosophical idea. Moral absurdity is where there isn't actually freaking existing laws and etc. I'm granted that there are existing laws, but because of this, within this hypothetical framework as well, it would contradict it, right? But because I'm also saying that he won't actualize it, he just has the ability. That does not induce moral absurdity. That suggests that it will be the case if I did grant that. But again, the entire point was about me inducing that he has the potentiality to do it, but he will not. The distinction here is the misconception of potentiality and actuality. And again, that doesn't induce that moral laws will not exist or not, because again, within the hypothetical, it's just going to lead to a moral collapse where that's a logical impossibility or just a nomological impossibility as well. If we do grant Islamic theology is going to be the case. So again, the framework you're trying to apply does not work. There's a contradiction within that. So again, I agree, again, it's potentiality. You don't actually track that. Hold up, let me just ask you a question, because this is getting embarrassing for you. What do you think moral absurdity is, Jayden? What do you think that is? Go ahead.
No, listen, since that first part was actually pretty ass, let me just repeat it again. So you pretty much just admit it's arbitrary, because listen, even if God won't command evil, the fact that he can, that morality is derived from him, that it depends on him, means it depends on an arbitrary power. You're saying that murder can be good, not because it's just because it's derived from God. That means morality is waiting on a decision derived from God once again.
And it's not a waiting on a situation. What? No, it's morality is already actualized because we already derived that. It wouldn't be waiting on it or just say, for example, arbitrary, because in the context of Allah's model of ontology, you want to say, for example, him being all-knowing, he would already know morality is being created by him. So it would not be arbitrary, or arbitrary is being based on chance and etc. Or just saying, say for example, oh, fuck this, I'm gonna do this, right? That's where we make a basis. Let me just bring up the definition again, real quick. Give me a second. Yeah, that would be based on random choice and whim. No. Again, it's already the entire point about our test of faith also just counteracts this. The point about our test in faith is that it's not arbitrary. It's to test his subjects for Islam. Islam equals the submission to God. He's testing them for submission to God. So it's not arbitrary or based on random chance. It's based upon to test our faith and our submission to him to uphold these moral laws which exist, right? So again, there's no arbitrary thing that exists via him knowing that this will be the case within the framework, right? So within the framework, he knows that humans exist, right? He provides these moral laws for us to uphold, right? For their belief in submission. That would not be arbitrary or random based on chance or on a personal whim. That would basically be implied as a sort of test for us.
Okay.
Test hold again. So this would basically be him, saying, for an example, right? Hey, here's this thing. I want you to know that I'm the one true God, right? So here's this doctrine. Here's the Quran, created by me. You have your sets. You have this. I want you to follow this and be a good Muslim. Follow this. Uphold my laws, and you will get Jannah. And your test proves how much you will be to me, right? So him creating morality is not on personal whim, but it's conditioned. Or not conditioned because no, it's just decided basically because of our existence, right? Morality exists for these laws to make it up. The test of belief is the moral laws and how we follow them. It's the case. So again, that already negates your point about fucking arbitrariness. Go ahead.
Okay, so listen. Listen. Because what you're saying entails another contradiction in what, even if God chooses, right? Because I understand that God would not choose to command evil. That entails that morality is not objective. Because if God just has preferences, then objectivity will never be reached. Because let's say for example, right? Bring up to the other example. If he says that killing is wrong in this situation and killing is right in another situation that would just entail from his preferences and subjectivity from him. You know what I'm saying here?
No, that does not actually induce anything. Oh my gosh. That does not prove that morality is not objective. What? Like, what? Oh my gosh. Dude. Oh, man. Oh, man. Dude, you are so close to making me, like, piss on myself, because, like, I'm, like, laughing, like, just behind the screen. Like, bro. I'm, like, hold up. Just, like, hold up. Like, yo, Paragon, you there? Hold up, Paragon. You mic off real quick?
Yeah, what's good, what's good?
Yo, so can you, like, hand me the world's tiniest violin for this dude?
World's tiniest one.
Yeah, the world's tiniest violin, man. Just time that I could just play this guy. Like, I'm just doing this, man. Like, I'm a music professional for this guy. Like, this guy would legit get me a music from the amount of music notes I would make off him. Just for, like, right now, bro. So,
Are you gonna respond?
True.
yeah. I'm gonna pause it. Just give me a second, bro. Just give it a second for the ones. Oh, he got the world's tiniest villain, bro. Yo, Paragon, you're a G now. Like, now it's time to, like, dismiss this nigga. So, again, if more laws, like, exist basically on him wanting this, like, say, for example, no, that isn't, morality is just going to be not objective. No. Moral laws are set in place for us, and him going for personal living wouldn't entail that he could also make, like, evil existence, such as just arbitrary. No. Like, again, moral laws exist in place for us. It's not necessarily where, oh my goodness, bro. Actually, you know what? Could you just go ahead and, like, repeat your point just so I have clarification? Like, just go ahead.
Okay.
Like, I have
So
one
you're
problem
saying
now.
that God could command murder and it would still be good, but because he won't, then that makes it not. That makes it so it's more permissible. No, actually no. Fuck, I fucked up my point. Hold on. Okay, so because you're saying that God could command murder, for example, even though he said that currently that murder, generally speaking, would be wrong, if it's right? Then, but he's saying that, oh yeah, don't worry, I wouldn't do it. Then that's literally just subjective, and you're saying that, for example, that if you say, oh yeah, command genocide here, then it'll be more permissible. But because he won't do it, then that doesn't contradict. But what I'm saying here is that that's just literally divine obedience to him, which unjustifiably to whatever he says is derived from him. He can change no more logical laws at any given time. That's just literally like a metaphorical, more guns to our head. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, no, that isn't. Okay, so hold up. So him choosing to make this the case, I already explained why it wouldn't be the case that he would do this. Like, him having the ability has nothing to do with preferences or anything. He wouldn't do this because basically we already explained that the framework already is, like, within the framework, we examined and already explained and dissected that within the framework, because more laws aren't set, because of our system for God, divine obedience, like absolute divine obedience for him, right? Him having the ability does not actualize it. Again, him having the ability won't entail that he will do it, right? So your entire point about it being subjective is not necessarily the case for proving that moral laws are not objective like you already originally claimed. Moral laws do exist, but I already bet that Allah could do this. This doesn't like negate that moral law.
But if morality is derived from him, and what's right and wrong is derived from God, then the morality would be subjected to his preferences. For example, you just said that killing was wrong and genocide's wrong. Then if God says do genocide and do killing, then that would still be morally permissible and morally justified to you, and that just entails contradiction.
That's the reason why I already admitted and granted that framework would already have a fucking contradiction, you dumbass.
But then you just that this contradiction that exists there.
Okay, I already granted that framework right there, him admitting that because the moral laws established within the Quran contradict that, and Allah's words are eternal, right? They do not go through this change because they are eternal and necessary, like him, because it's a part of Allah. His speech is a part of him, right? So because the speech itself is eternal, and if we apply a change to them, there is a contradiction. If he backtracks his laws, it's going to be a contradiction. And that leads to a moral collapse where it removes the contingency, or rather, Actually, yeah, it does remove the contingency about that. And it just proves it a logical impossibility or non-logical impossibility for this to be the case. Again, him having the ability is not establishing that it would be the case. And again, yes, him deciding what's right or wrong can be subjective. I'll grant that it could be, like, say for example, a model of subjectivism, right? But that doesn't necessarily disprove moral laws exist. Because the conceptual distinction is that morality does exist within the set of all contingent things which we follow, which is put up for us to follow via the teachings of the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad, may peace be upon him, right? And now, since we already have that, since because him changing his words would be a contradiction, we cannot grant that this would be actually morally permissible. I just granted that he has the ability to do that. It doesn't necessarily mean he will make it that, because, again, like, if you're trying to infer that the ability cannot be the case because of the said contradiction which we have, no, because there's no contradiction within that. I'm saying that he wouldn't do this because I'm saying that he wouldn't actualize this to be the case because of the previous moral laws and the Quran thingy, which I mentioned, right? And again, going back,
I'll let you finish, don't worry about it. I'll let you finish. Just come on back.
and so via the Kalat thingy, which I already gave for an etc., right? The contradiction we cannot grant. It's going to be the case. Oh. Okay, so sorry, there's tons of people interrupting me. I'm about to hit them in the face, bro. Actually, no, that's wrong. That's wrong. No, I'm not gonna hit anybody's face. That's wrong. But yeah, no. Via the contradiction which we have, we cannot grant that he would make this. I just grant he has the ability. That's the thing. Him having the ability does not guarantee he will, allow this for this to be permissible. It won't be morally permissible via the Quran thingy. Again, that's my entire point kind of there. So, granted, you could say that the subjective thing about him, viewing this and that as good, right, or evil could just have, moral, absurdity to Allah's thinking set. Not thinking set, but rather, judgment. But that's because the moral laws do not apply to him, like I suggested. The contingent things do not apply to him. That would just imply moral absurdity for Allah and not us, because Allah judges by the contingent laws set for us to uphold. Because it's upholded by us, He judges off those laws and what's asserted within them. We can grant that His perspective upon morality within this said framework can be morally absurd, but that does not negate the objectivity of our moral laws which He has established. So again, your entire point just bubbles down to His different distinct things about His view within morality versus how He upholds, or rather judges, based upon ours. The laws to which He says judges off there, because there's two token stages of those judgments, which I'm implying because you're using the other one, or rather practically the judgment about Allah's worldview instead of ours. If we judge by what's morally permissible to us, for which we follow, we would have to follow the moral laws established for us to uphold. That's the distinction right there. And since you're using that, that just goes off a contradiction, or rather a conclusion which doesn't follow from your argumentation. Now you can respond if you want.
Okay, listen. So I'm not saying that objective morality can't exist. You're already presupposing a strawmanning on that. I'm saying that your version, right, and the Quran, or rather Islam's disposition of it, where morality is entirely derived from God's command, makes it inherently untrustworthy because it's subjective to Him, and that it's literally indistinguishable from complete divine obedience and derived. And since it's entirely derived from Him, then that literally just makes the entirety of morality pretty much nihilistic in a sense. And you're not really refuting that in any way. I'm not saying that moral laws can't exist. I'm saying that your disposition of such is. And it's literally indistinguishable from fucking, divine obedience from your mom, where like you're saying you fucking do, like it's just divine obedience, pretty much.
Yeah, no, I already like refuted that entire thing. Like one, I proved how that entire thing would just be a contradiction, and I provided the two judgment things, right? The judgment about his perspective upon our world, and how he judges based upon our laws and how we uphold. That's the reason why he judges what's morally permissible from that, based upon how we uphold that, right? And it's not necessarily how he what's morally permissible. He goes by what he already asserted to be morally permissible to us. He views upon us and how we uphold these specific laws for a test. That's what I'm saying. Like,
wait, can you repeat it?
Exactly.
Can you repeat it one more time?
I can repeat. Yeah. So again, him like making off like a subjective thing. Okay, I already implied or gave the argumentation. And since you're going off the whim about Allah's judgment, or rather, like, say, for an example, that, how he views these things is not necessarily, like, applicable to him. My earlier point was that we cannot apply contingent things to necessary things, because that would lead to another contradiction, right? So, because I put a rather just translation within there, I'm saying that he wouldn't necessarily follow, or rather, like, grant that because of the contradiction with the Quran thingy as well, right? So, when he talks about morality, he can have a subjective view, which is only to him, right? But he judges based upon our moral laws. So, again, the entire point
are our moral laws derived from him, or does he derive it to us? Because you pretty much just like...
No. I'll explain.
From him, right? Like you just said, if it's derived from him, which is subjective, then how the fuck can morality be objective? That's what I'm saying.
I know, that's what I'm answering. I'm saying that the laws which he set for us is objective. Well, I'm saying that his subjective viewpoint is going to be that it's just, like, say, for example, not necessarily the same, or it's just token distinction from the ones which he placed for us, right? That's what I'm saying. The moral laws which derives from him for that is derived from him. Yes. It's basically contingent upon him. Without him, he's a lot of necessity for us to gain that. And because of that, it also just leads to a contradiction, too. That's another contradiction within that moral framework. If we say that Allah, within the Islamic framework, that if we do not grant the moral laws set for us are come, or just, like, are not linked from Allah, or rather are arbitrary as well, then, I mean, it is off personal whim as well, despite also just being based upon our tests, or rather